Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So this is a part 2 video. In the first part of the video I tidied up my front garden with all the beds either side here. Took all the weeds out, covered it in a nice mulch of manure, and that's now ready for planting. So in this video what I'll be doing is I'll be doing a little bit of tidying up all these old pots here. I've just got all my pots collected together. You take the weeds out, get them planted up with some nice bedding plants. The same with these whiskey barrels here. We're going to put in some nice big banana trees there. Then we're going to be planting up the beds as well. So in the beds here, we're going to have a tall banana tree in this section. We've already got the dahlias planted. They were planted in the last video. And then I'll be putting in lots and lots of bedding plants. So first of all, we'll start with this corner. I'll give you a closer look of how it's looking now and see what needs to be done to get this looking nice again. So this is the worst side, I would say, by far. So what it is we had a lot of strawberries last year. A lot of their leaves, they need to be tidied up and be put away. I've also got these pots which had bedding in last year. Unfortunately, the frost has killed all the bedding, but we have got a little bit of regrowth here. You can just see there on the fuchsia, the same with this fuchsia and that fuchsia as well. So I'll just be cutting these back and removing the weeds and then allowing these to grow. This will allow these fuchsias to grow up, and I'll put bedding around the outside. Same with these other pots. I'm just going to take all the weeds out. These other pots are empty, so they're just going to have a fresh start with plants. And then we've got the big whiskey barrels as well. The idea for that is I'm going to get my banana trees, put them in the middle, bedding trailing around the outside. I'll also need to top the soil up slightly because it's sunk over the last few months. And I'll be moving the box plants elsewhere. I've got 2 box plants in the front garden. They don't really fit in with the rest of the theme, so I'll be putting them into the back garden. So to start with, I'll just clear out all the dead, all the weeds, and then I'll talk a bit more about planting and the plant choices I'm going for this summer. So that's this front area now tidied and just about ready for planting. All I need to do now is top up some of the old compost and fill some of the empty pots, and they'll be ready for planting. But I'd now like to show you what plants I'm going to go with this year and where I'm going to put them in the garden. So I'll start with the biggest plants first. So that biggest plant will be this one over here, the banana. The banana tree here isn't a hardy banana like some of my other banana trees. This is actually the edible Musa acuminata banana, so the one you would normally get in the shops. So this has grown really well for me outside last summer, which I wasn't expecting because normally here in Scotland it's quite cool in the summers and you wouldn't expect it to do well. But I had it in this whiskey barrel over here, and this is a real sun trap. This is the south facing garden, so a lot of sun reflects and heat also reflects off this wall. That seems to keep it warm. I did really well there. So I've overwintered it over in my conservatory, but as you can see it's not looking at its best, but that's quite normal for bananas at this time of year. I wouldn't expect them to be looking nice. Within 2 or 3 months it'll put out lots of new leaves and it'll look really nice though. So this is actually going to go in the garden just at the front of the bed here. It's now too big to go in the whiskey barrel, and it grows incredibly fast once it gets going. So once it gets going, this will be really quite a large banana by the end of the summer. So that's why it'll be going here in the bed. It needs all that space for its roots. So the next biggest plants will be these 2 bananas at the back here. So these are my Enseti ventricosum bananas. These are definitely not hardy either, but I overwinter them inside in a frost-free location, and then they start growing around this time of year. So these are going to go outside. These grow even faster than the other bananas, grow really lovely big lush leaves. They'll go a lot more of a bronze colour. There's not much bronze colouring at the moment because they've been in a lower light environment, but once they get that strong sunshine on them, they'll get a really lovely bronze colour to the leaf and look really attractive. So these 2 will be going in the whiskey barrels as a central focal point. As I say, these grow incredibly fast. By the end of summer, these will probably be almost as tall as me. So very fast growing bananas. These will look really nice in those 2 barrels, I think. So talking about the 2 barrels, I'm going to underplant them with some trailing lobelias. So I've got some blue, I really like lobelias, I really like blue and purple flowers. This is a dark blue trailing lobelia. So these will be planted up and around the whiskey barrels there, and they will trail over the edge and the bananas will grow up. So the two will pair together really nicely. So that's the trailing lobelia. I quite like lobelia as well because here in Scotland we don't have very strong light levels, and we have quite cool temperatures sometimes, even during the middle of the summer. So lobelias, they can take it down to close to freezing, and they don't seem to be affected too much by the cold weather. Whereas petunias and other plants, they can be a little bit affected by the cooler nights that we have here in Scotland. And that is why the majority of my bedding for my beds this year will be lobelias again. Hopefully we don't have too much of a dry spell. It is very dry at the moment. We often have dry springs here and then quite wet summers, so we'll see how it goes. It might need to be watered, but I've got lots of bedding lobelia. So this lobelia is different to the trailing one. It's a bush variety. It's just a bit smaller. It doesn't grow very long, leggy growth that hangs down. So this is good for the borders. So I'll be filling up the borders with this, underplanting the roses, and just basically having some lines either side of the bed using these lobelia. Then the big giant dahlias will grow up tall, as will the banana tree and the roses, and these will just become like an underplanting. So these will look really nice there. Unfortunately, the place I got this from, basically bedding plants can be quite expensive in my area, and there's one shop that does them really cheap. So you can see this is £3.50 and I've got 20 plants. Unfortunately, I don't know what the colour is. I really would have liked to know the colour. Ideally these aren't all mixed colours, because I don't like the look of just random colours of lobelia. Hopefully it's blue. I'm not entirely sure what these will be, but we'll just have to find out when they start to flower. And then moving on to the other pots, there's more pots than I remembered, so I didn't actually buy enough plants for them all. So I've got a lot more Enseti ventricosum bananas, those bronze coloured ones. So they'll be going in some of these pots individually if I don't have enough plants for the pots. But otherwise, what the plan is the pots will be planted up with these marguerites. So I quite like marguerites. They do quite well if you've got a very hot, sunny place. This part of the garden gets very hot and sunny, so as I say, the beds themselves aren't too bad, they're away from the house. But anything I plant towards the house on that concrete area next to the wall, the concrete warms up, gets very hot, and you get the heat from the sun reflecting off the wall as well. It's a very hot location, so that's why I've gone for marguerites. They love hot, sunny weather. As long as you keep deadheading them, you'll get lots and lots of flowers constantly. And I can show you, I've also got a large one as well. My local garden centre was doing a half price offer, so I couldn't resist. So I got a nice large one, and that just shows you the kind of size they can get to. They can get much larger than this as well. They can almost become like miniature trees. So I really like marguerites, just keep deadheading them. They should flower for me all summer long. So these will be going in the middle of the pots, and then around the outside, I'm going to have some trailing petunias. So I really wanted purple petunias, as purple is one of my favourite colours in the garden. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any purple petunias this year, so I've got some red ones. So these will be trailing, as I say. I'll be dotting them inside the pots. Again, these love warmer temperatures and hot weather, so these will go really well in that really sunny spot right there with the pots and the wall. And these are trailing varieties, so you can get bush or trailing, same with lobelias. The bush ones will just, as the name suggests, grow up tall and bushy. The trailing ones have longer stems and they'll trail down the edge of the pots. So these will be underplanted in some of the larger pots around with the marguerites. And if I have any left over, because as I say, I underestimated how many pots I had, these will also go, if I do have enough, I will try and stretch them out to go underneath the Ensetis, but at this moment, I'm not sure if I have quite enough plants for that. So that's all the plants, as I say. What I'll do now is I will change the camera angle. I will give you a close-up of the whiskey barrel, and I'll plant out one of the whiskey barrels and talk about how I'll be doing that. As I say, Enseti ventricosum in the middle and then trailing lobelia around the outside. So I'm going to be using this whiskey barrel as an example what I'll be doing with all the pots if they've got existing compost. If they haven't got existing compost, I'll just be mixing a mixture of soil and compost into them. So this is mostly compost mix in here. There is a bit of soil as well. It's getting a bit tired now. It's had a whole season of growing plants and they've been using all the feed and nutrients up. Also the compost level has reduced, as it often does as it slowly breaks down. So what I need to do is add some fresh compost and also some fertilizer. So the fertilizer I'll be using for this is Growmore. For my beds I tend to use bloodfish and bone because that's the slow release fertilizer, but for plant pots you really want to give them all that nutrients straight away, so I like to give them Growmore, which is fairly slow release. It will last several weeks, but I like to give Growmore because it's a faster releasing one, and I'll just liquid feed after the first couple of months once the Growmore is used up. So I'm just going to add some compost. And then I'll scatter in a few handfuls of grow more. I want this to be very high in feed. These are very hungry plants, especially the bananas, so I'm going to make sure there's plenty of feed added to these compost mixes, and then just going to mix this all in, make sure it's nicely mixed into the compost, particularly the top level. And if there's any large lumps or anything like that, I'm just going to break them up with my hand, make sure it's nice and loose. I'll also keep an eye out for any large weed roots or anything, but I think I've weeded it fairly well. There shouldn't be any large roots remaining. So with the smaller pots, I'll be doing this with a hand fork or a hand trowel. This larger pot, because it's such a big whiskey barrel, that's why I'm using the full-size fork. So there we go, that's it nicely mixed in. There's a few little sticks and things to pull out, but generally it's quite a nice fine mix of compost now, and that'll be ready for planting. So just make sure it's level. Now we can go ahead and plant. So when I do this with the compost, I always make sure I have at least an inch or so left of space at the top of the pot. There's a couple of reasons for this. One reason is when you're planting in the new plants, you move apart the soil to make space for the plant pot, and you're actually going to raise the level of the compost. So always bear that in mind, leave a little bit of space for the compost to raise when you do that. The other reason is if you plant to the very top and you flood the pot with water to try and water it, what will happen is it will just flow over the outside and you won't get much water in the pot. What you want is an inch, so when you water it, it can fill up that top inch with water and then slowly permeate into the compost. So that's another reason why you want to leave that little bit of space at the top of your pots. So I'm going to start with this insetti here. I'm just going to place it in the middle of the pot right there. So I'm just going to make a space with my trowel. Putting it in the middle there has left a slight indent, so I know exactly how much space I need. And then there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can either just guess the size yourself, double check it a few times and pot it in, or what some people find easier is you dig a hole bigger than what you need. You then bury your pot and you push it down fairly firm around the sides to make sure the compost will stay. You then twist the pot, pull it up, you got a perfect planting hole, which should be an identical size to the pot that it originally came from. And then you can just push the compost in, make sure it's firmed in so it's got support against the wind, and then that'll be it planted up. So that's my insetti planted up now in the middle of the pot. Now I need to put in the trailing lobelia around the outside. So here's my lobelia. What I like to do is I like to place them all on the surface before I plant them. That way I can rearrange any plants if I need to. Now there's a few different types of bedding packs, but they're all pretty much the same how you get all into them. Just push at the bottom until you hear a crack or the plant pops up, and then you can gently pull your plant out. I like to lean it onto the side slightly so that you're not working against gravity, and it'll come out much easier like that. So I'm expecting I might need to use the whole pack, so I'm going to take these all out and then I'm going to spread them out. So with these will grow in all directions, so I'm going to put them towards the edge of the pot. I'm just going to space them out at a good spacing. When it comes to bedding, I always like to save money, so I like to space them out a reasonable amount, knowing that these plants will grow in the future. So we can see there, that's a nice spacing of plants. I've only got one left over, and I don't have many pots that I could just put one in, so I'm going to put this in as well. So I'm just going to bunch them all up slightly, reduce the spacing, and that way I can get them all fitted in. So there we go, I'm quite happy with the spacing and the positioning there, so I'm just going to go ahead now and plant them. And with these, I'm just going to push the soil aside, pop them in, give them a gentle firm. You don't want to push too hard because then you're going to compact the soil and the roots won't grow as well, but just firm enough that there's no air spaces and that if it's windy it's not going to get blown out or a bird's not going to peck it out. And you want to be planting it about the same depth as what you were planting it in its original pot. So basically look at the soil level, you want the soil level to be the same as the soil level that it's actually growing at. So you don't want to bury the stems or anything like that. So that's all planted up. As I say, it does look quite bare at the moment, but don't make the mistake of putting in too much bedding. You could easily put in 5 times the amount of plants as this. You'd have an instant carpet, but then they'd all be struggling for space. They wouldn't do as well in the long run, and you'd be spending 5 times as much money. So space them out properly. These will grow very quickly, especially summer bedding plants, because of the nice warm summer environment. They're going to grow very quickly for you. keep them well fed. This will fill this whole area within a month or so. By the end of summer, this will be cascading down the edge of the whiskey barrels and looking really nice. So I'm just going to go ahead now with the rest of my pots, do the same kind of thing, and then we're going to talk about the beds and show you what I'm going to be doing with planting up the beds as well. So that's all the pots now planted up. As you can see, I did differ the style slightly with some of them. So the smaller pots, I couldn't really fit 3 of the petunias around. So what I've done here is I've put in 2 of the petunias and I've put the margarita at the back. That way it's got enough space. And when I have these positioned, I will always have this at the back so that you see this coming over the front. If this was the other way around or rotated the pot, it wouldn't really make sense. It wouldn't look as good. So that's why this is at the back and this is at the front. But the bigger ones, like the ones I showed you previously, 3 around the outside, they'll cascade evenly around the pot. And you can see I've got margarita on its own, and a settee on its own, right at the back over there, and then the other settee in the whiskey barrel. So there's a couple of plant pots that already had things in it. It's like this one here, which had a fuchsia towards the back. So this fuchsia is still starting to re-sprout. So this one needs to have space to grow. So I've just put the one petunia in the front there. Same with this one here. There's a fuchsia coming up and there's already loads of nice violas, so I'll just put the petunia in the front. I put one of my giant sunflowers in that old chimney. I always like to grow a sunflower in that pot over the summertime. And then coming around here, I've not planted anything yet in this pot. I don't really have enough plants. And also this, once this bush is up, this is quite a bushy fuchsia, that should fill most of that pot. And then at the end here, I've got that Ansetti again. And then I had this trough, which looks quite nice when it's planted up, so I thought I'll put some of my bush lobelia in there that I was going to put in the main bed. But that's all planted anyway. I think it's looking quite good for now. It will take a time for it to actually fully establish and start to look good. But what I'll do is I'll tweak the pots and move them around. This is certainly not the final position for the pots. As the plants grow, I'll just move them. And that's one of the nice things about having the pots, is they're easy to move. The whiskey barrels as well, although they're very heavy, it's not too difficult to move the whiskey barrels because you can kind of roll them. So they can be moved as well, but generally I always keep the whiskey barrels in that position. So that's it for this part of the video. Now I will go on to talking about the beds. What we got to do is we got to plant that large banana over there in the bed. And then I'll also be planting the bedding. We've got all those lobelias that need to go in. So now the plots are all planted up, it's now time for me to focus on my beds. So as I said before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the lobelia plants, I'm going to put them along, and I'm going to put them in rows either side of the bed. There's just going to be a row here and a row over there. The reason for that is these are going to fill up this nice space here where I don't have any plants. The middle areas that look bare right now, they're actually going to have dahlias in them. So the dahlias are already planted. They grow really large, especially this one here. This one last year was about this high. Absolutely filled the whole space. So I can't really plant anything around there. Although it looks empty now, that will fill in really fast. And the same with the rose plants as well. They're going to grow a lot larger, so I don't need anything else. So I just need that row along the edge. But what I'll also do is I'll plant my banana tree. So what I've done is I've left a space here. I'm going to put the tall banana tree, and then I might put some Ansettis around it as well, just to give it a little bit of interest. Because at the moment it'll just be that one tall skinny banana. But I might, as I say, make a little bit of collection of bananas. So I'll go ahead now and I'll start planting. I'll get the bedding in and I'll get that banana tree planted. So that's the beds now all planted up. As you saw, when I spaced them out, I did have a few extras, so I've dotted them either side of some of the dahlias. These will probably become a little bit too crowded, but at least there'll be some kind of flowers in the early summer before the dahlias really come up and get established. So it's looking quite empty at the moment, as you can see, but all these plants are going to grow a lot, and by the end of the summer I'll have huge dahlias up to here. Bananas will definitely be taller than my head, and we'll have a nice cover of bedding on the ground as well. So you saw I did put in an extra insetti banana down here. I was thinking I might get 4 around here, but when I brought them outside and had a look at them, there actually wasn't enough space. Same with this side. I decided to put one of my other bananas in that I was going to put in the back garden, but then there's no space for any insettis around that either. So my insettis, I've got probably about 20 of them in total. I'll probably be putting them in my tropical garden in the back, and I'll give you guys an update on that probably in a few weeks' time. But that's all for this part of the video. So that's all planted up and ready for summer. I'll give it a really good water now, and I'll see you guys probably at the end of summer with another update and show you how it's grown over the season and what kind of size these plants have got to by then.